The cold night. It was a chilly evening, the kind where the cold seemed to cut through even the thickest coats. Dwayne Johnson walked through the market, his hands tucked into his jacket pockets after a long and exhausting day. He loved this time of year, the festive lights, the bustle of people, but tonight, something felt different. As he passed by a park bench, he noticed a small family huddled together. Their clothes were thin, no match for the biting wind that whipped through the air. The father sat with his arms around his two children, trying to shield them from the cold. The mother pulled a tattered blanket tighter around them, but it was obvious it wasn't enough. Dwayne paused, his chest tightening at the sight. The youngest child, a girl with big, tear-filled eyes, shivered uncontrollably. Her brother, slightly older, rubbed her hands with his own, his face set in a look of quiet determination. Dwayne knew that look. It was a face of someone trying to be strong, even when it felt impossible. He approached the family slowly, crouching down so he wouldn't startle them. His voice was soft but steady. "Hey there," he said, his breath visible in the frosty air. "Why are you out here? Do you have a place to stay?" The father, a man with tired eyes and a scruffy beard, hesitated. He glanced at his wife before answering in a low voice, as if ashamed to admit it. "We lost our home. There was a fire. We've got nowhere to go." Dwayne frowned deeply, the weight of their words settling heavily on his shoulders. "What about shelters?" he asked, his voice full of concern. The mother, her face lined with exhaustion and worry, shook her head. "They're full," she said, her voice cracking. "We've tried everywhere. No one has space for us." Her eyes glistened with unshed tears as she clutched her children closer. Dwayne felt a lump rise in his throat. This wasn't right. It wasn't fair. He straightened up and looked at the family with determination. "You're not staying out here tonight," he said firmly, his voice leaving no room for argument. "Let's get you somewhere warm." A warm meal. Dwayne led the family through the cold streets, his broad frame shielding them from the worst of the wind. They entered a small, cozy cafe, the warmth inside wrapping around them like a much-needed embrace. The two children's eyes widened as the smells of freshly baked bread and hot coffee filled the air. They sat at a corner table, and Dwayne quickly ordered food for them. When the steaming plates arrived, soup, sandwiches, and hot chocolate, the children's faces lit up. They ate with the kind of hunger that spoke volumes about how long it had been since their last proper meal. "You don't have to do this," the father, John, said quietly, his voice filled with both gratitude and embarrassment. He avoided Dwayne's gaze, staring down at his soup instead. "Yes, I do," Dwayne replied without hesitation. His voice was kind but firm. "No one should be out in the cold like this, especially kids. This is the least I can do." As they ate, the family began to open up. John explained that he had been a carpenter, but after the fire that destroyed their home, everything had fallen apart. They had no savings left and had been living on the streets for weeks, trying to get by day to day. The mother, Sarah, added, "We've tried so hard to find help, but there's only so much we can do. Every door seems to be closed." Her voice broke as she spoke, and she quickly wiped away a tear. Dwayne listened intently, his heart heavy with their story. "You've been through so much," he said, his deep voice filled with empathy. "But I promise you, tonight is the start of something better. You're not alone anymore. Help on the way." After stepping away to make some calls, Dwayne returned to the table. The family looked up at him, their expressions a mix of hope and uncertainty. "I've arranged a place for you to stay tonight," he said, his voice warm and reassuring. "It's a safe, private space where you can all rest. Tomorrow, we'll figure out the next steps together." Sarah covered her mouth with her hands, her eyes brimming with tears. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice shaking. "We didn't know how much longer we could hold on." Dwayne knelt down beside the children, his large, steady hands resting gently on the table. "You're going to be okay," he said, looking into their hopeful faces. "I promise." He stood and placed a reassuring hand on John's shoulder. "You're not alone anymore," he repeated firmly. We'll get through this together. For the first time in weeks, John and Sarah allowed themselves to believe that maybe, just maybe, things could get better, asterisk a new beginning, asterisk. The next morning, Dwayne met the family again, his usual warm smile on his face. This time, the family looked a little better. A hot meal and a warm night's sleep had done wonders. Still, their eyes carried traces of worry about what lay ahead. "I've been working on something for you," Dwayne began, sitting down with them. "John, I've got a job lined up for you at my production company. It's steady work with good pay and benefits." John blinked, his breath catching in his throat. "A job? For me?" His voice was low, trembling with disbelief. Dwayne nodded firmly. "That's right. You mentioned you've got skills as a carpenter, and we could use someone like you. It's hard work, but it's steady, and it'll give you a chance to start over." John's hand shook slightly as he reached up to wipe his eyes. "I don't know how to thank you," he said, his voice cracking. "I've been trying so hard, but nothing seemed to work. And now..." Dwayne reached across the table, resting a reassuring hand on John's shoulder. "Don't worry about thanking me," he said gently. "Just take this opportunity and build a better future for your family. That's all the thanks I need." He turned to Sarah, who sat quietly, holding Emily on her lap. "And Sarah," Dwayne continued, "I've found some resources for you too. If you need help with healthcare, childcare, or even going back to school, there are programs available to support you." Sarah's lips trembled as she looked at her children, then back at Dwayne. "You've already done so much," she whispered. "You've given us hope when we thought we'd lost everything." Dwayne smiled, his voice kind but firm. "You're not alone in this anymore. It's going to take time, but things will get better. I promise." The family was moved to a temporary shelter while arrangements were made for their new home. It was a small but safe space, and for the first time in weeks, they didn't have to worry about where they would sleep or how they would stay warm. A fresh start. Weeks later, Dwayne arrived at the family's new home, a modest but beautiful house that had been fully furnished and prepared for them. The children, Emily and Tim, could barely contain their excitement as they stepped through the door. Emily squealed with delight as she ran from room to room, her small feet echoing on the floors. Tim followed close behind, his face lit up with pure joy. "There's a bed for each of us," he exclaimed. "And look, a table for eating dinner." Sarah stood in the doorway, her hand pressed to her mouth as tears streamed down her face. "This is ours?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dwayne nodded. "All yours," he said warmly. "A fresh start for a wonderful family." John stood frozen, his hands gripping the back of a chair as he struggled to take it all in. "I can't believe this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "We have a home again, our own home." Dwayne clapped a hand on his back. "You deserve it," he said simply. "Now go make it yours." Finding hope. As the weeks passed, the Smith family began to rebuild their lives piece by piece. John thrived in his new job, throwing himself into the work with determination and pride. His confidence grew with every project he completed, and his co-workers admired his dedication. Sarah found ways to give back, volunteering at a local community center and helping others who were facing hard times. For the first time in a long time, she felt like she had a purpose again. Emily and Tim excelled in school, their laughter filling the walls of their new home. They made friends, worked hard on their studies, and brought home drawings and stories to share with their parents. One evening, during a visit from Dwayne, Emily shyly handed him a piece of paper. It was a crayon drawing of their house, with her family standing in front of it. In the middle of the drawing was Dwayne, smiling as he stood beside them. "This is you with us," Emily said proudly. Tim, standing next to her, held out a small letter he had written. "Thank you for helping us," it read. "I want to be strong like you someday." Dwayne's eyes softened as he knelt down to their level. "You're already strong, Tim," he said, his voice filled with emotion. "You and your family have shown incredible strength through everything you've been through." Don't ever forget that. Will you visit us again? Tim asked, looking up at him with hopeful eyes. You bet, Dwayne said, wrapping both children in a warm hug. You're stuck with me now. A brighter future. Months later, Dwayne visited the family again. This time, the atmosphere in their home was filled with warmth and joy. John greeted him with a firm handshake, a broad smile on his face. I've been promoted, John said, his voice brimming with pride. And it's all thanks to you giving me that chance. Sarah joined them, her face glowing with happiness. I've started taking classes, she said. I never thought I'd have the chance, but now I feel like anything is possible. The children ran to Dwayne, excited to share their latest school projects and stories. Their laughter filled the room, a testament to how far they had come. We owe all of this to you, Sarah said, her voice thick with emotion. Dwayne shook his head, his expression kind but serious. You did this, he said. I just gave you a little push. The strength to rebuild came from you. The Smith family had gone from despair to hope, proving that even in the darkest times, kindness and second chances could light the way. And for Dwayne, their journey was a powerful reminder of how compassion could change lives, not just for those who received it, but for those who gave it as well.